Wait, what? How does this work? What is the difference in quality between a cheap and an expensive freelance software developer? And how do they differ from a FAANG level software engineer? And could all of their work just be done by ChatGPT anyways? With the help of today's sponsor Fiverr, we're going to be testing just that. I'm going to hire 4 different freelance software developers off of their website, each to do the exact same job, but at different price points. And then I'm also going to give the exact same prompt to ChatGPT, as well as I'm going to create my own version of the website myself as well. And then we'll do a blind comparison, comparing all of the different websites we get based on their code quality as well as the actual design of the website. Each developer is going to be given the exact same prompt to create a portfolio website for Thaddeus Castellano, an up-and-coming Italian painter. They're going to be given a bio of him, an image of him, as well as 10 pieces of his artwork. All of this, of course, being AI generated. Other than that, though, they're going to have full and complete creative control to create the best website possible for Thaddeus. Okay, so our first developer is Lakshay, coming in at just $10. Honestly, I have no idea what we can get for just $10, but I'm interested to find out. Next, we have Kashif, and I apologize if I'm completely butchering these names, but Kashif here says that they will develop a responsive website with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and with 183 reviews and a perfect 5-star rating, I do expect this one to be pretty good. And I'm also going to order their standard package to see what we actually get with a higher price point of $50. Next, we have Nadeem Designs, who says they will design and develop a modern website with the latest technologies. Sounds good to me. This one's going to be $175. And finally, we have Mr. Sahib, who says they will make their website out of this space, which I presume is better than out of this world, which sounds pretty great. And on his profile, it also says that he actually has a master's degree in computer science, so I have pretty high hopes for this one as well. This one's going to be $200, but it also says for an extra $50, we can get some animations on scroll, and I am a sucker for some good animations, so I will happily do that as well. While we wait, I will show you my version of the website. So this is sort of a loading animation I created where it sort of shows the Italian flag, and then we paint on the name Thaddeus Castellano, which shows up as the navbar. So it sort of animates into the navbar. Then we can see at the top, we just have a bunch of the different pieces of artwork. I originally was going to make like a hero image at the top, but then I thought about the fact that the art needs to be sort of the primary part of this design. So I decided to put the artwork all the way at the top. And whenever you hover over any of this artwork, it's going to get a little bit bigger. And if you click on it, it's going to sort of get bigger and blur out everything behind it so that you can really focus on that one piece of artwork. And we can do this on any of the art, and it's going to sort of move to the middle, blur out the background, and get bigger. I was super proud of this. I did this entirely vanilla, so this took a long time to get this working, but I was really proud of the way it turned out. Then if we continue scrolling, we'll see we have the Meet Thaddeus section where we have the image of Thaddeus, which I actually used Photoshop to remove the background of. And then for the background of this whole section, it's actually one of the pieces of artwork that I sort of darkened a bit so we could actually see the text on top of it. As well as I decided to make him sort of peep out of the box a little bit, which I thought sort of added a cool effect to the whole thing. And at the bottom, we have a contact form. So that's the version of the website I made. I'm pretty happy with it overall. I'm not the best designer in the world, so I'm pretty happy, honestly, with how this design turned out. There are some things I wish I could have done that I didn't have time to. For example, the intro animation, I wanted it to not just be the Italian flag to focus on his Italian heritage, but I wanted it to be sort of paint dripping and that dripping paint to form the Italian flag, but I didn't have time to do that animation. I also wanted the animation of creating his name with the paint to be like a paintbrush that was actually going to go letter by letter and create the name that way, but I didn't have time for that either. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. And here's the code for the website. It is all just vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In hindsight, maybe I should have used some libraries, Bootstrap, things like that could have made it better, but this is the way I decided to do it. So the HTML is pretty straightforward, it's just the markup for the page. I did try to be accessible a bit, so we have, for example, alt attributes on all of the images, and things like the blur and the paint loader for the different animations have ARIA hidden on them, essentially saying that these elements don't need to go in the accessibility tree because they're purely visual elements. Then we have the CSS, again, pretty straightforward. So we have a font. In the root, we add some variables to make sure we're being consistent with colors. I probably should add some more of these, but I have a few of them here. Then we have a scroll behavior of smooth in the root as well for the smooth scrolling. Then just a bunch of standard CSS. There's a ton of CSS here, so I'm not going to go over all of it. And then we have a bunch of different keyframe animations. So these are all of the animations you saw for animate on scroll, as well as just the initial loading animations. And then a bunch of media queries at the bottom as well for the responsive design. And then I have a pretty simple JavaScript file as well with 4 main functions. So clear paint after animation is just going to clean things up after that initial animation. Then we have set up scroll animations, which essentially is just using intersection observer to wait for the animate on scroll elements to get on screen. And when they do get on screen, we add this animate class, which triggers the animations to run. Then we have set up images, which sets up the ability for the main images to be clickable and sort of do that expanding effect. The way that actually works is it actually generates a new image, puts it on top, moves it to the middle, makes it bigger, and then shows the blur behind it at the same time. And then when you click off of the image, it sort of animates that image back to its original position, and then it deletes it from the DOM. And then we also have this function to show the blur, which just sort of animates on that blur for the blur that goes behind the images. And finally, we have the setup contact form, which is simply going to set up that contact form. So it just grabs the subject and the message whenever the submit button is clicked, and it's going to change the window location to be a mail to link, which is simply going to send an email with the subject and body automatically filled in. Okay, so it's been about a week and we got all of the websites back from the Fiverr sellers, as well as I have the ChatGPT website open. I'm going to try to guess which ones are which, as well as I'll give each one a rating out of 10 for the design and the code quality. So this is our first website. Automatically, just at first glance, I love this intro animation that they have. It's very simple, but it's very elegant. I feel like it sort of matches the Thaddeus vibe. And we say a gifted painter. I like this sort of almost logo that they created with like the circle around the EUS. Although I'm not sure that that represents anything. Usually when you sort of circle some portion of the name, it would represent something, but I don't know if like EUS is supposed to stand for something. But either way, this is a super good looking design. I like the sort of paint splatter in the background. Honestly, I tried to do something similar on my website and I wasn't able to get it to look very good. They also removed Thaddeus from the background, which looks great. And it looks like they also took some of the bio and put it up here in this sort of header section, which I like that too, because the bio was kind of long. So having all that text together is a little bit awkward looking on a website. It's something that people are just going to scroll past and not read. But when you sort of separate it, it's a little bit better, I think. So I really like that decision. And we have this contact button at the top. Ooh, that animation that's fire. That's a great animation. Okay, let's scroll down. We have the portfolio. Ooh, this looks nice too. Whoa, this like sort of like zoom out thing when you hover over the images, where it's like zooming out of the image, but the image size isn't changing. That's super nice. I don't know how I feel about this like corner cutoff thing forming these like diamonds. It's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's cutting off part of the artwork, and I don't know how I feel about that. Let's see, are these clickable? They are, so they sort of open similar to my website. Looks like this is probably using some form of library, just judging by how like sophisticated this like gallery system is, but regardless, it looks super good. So big fan of this portfolio. And then this about section. Ooh, that animation that's a smooth animation. And I like the way it's sort of like overlapping a bit. Like we have the about heading and this text sort of slightly overlaps it. It creates a very like cohesive design. So I'm a big fan of this design. And they did something similar to me where they used one of the pieces of artwork outside of the main portfolio. So big fan of that. And then we have this footer with the contact information. Overall, this one is super, super nice. At least from a design perspective, honestly, I think this one looks way better than the one I made. So from a design perspective, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. Okay, so now we have the code for this first one. And we can see right off the bat in the HTML, I don't love how many meta tags we have just because it looks like most of these aren't actually doing anything. Then we have some links, and we have, it looks like Bootstrap, Animate on Scroll, Font Awesome, Custom Font, CSS, and the Gallery pop-up, as well as this style tag. That's a little strange to have a style tag when everything else is in separate CSS files, so I don't love doing that, but I guess that's fine. Then we have the HTML. I like that they're using nav, so it's not just a bunch of divs. We have some semantic elements, which helps with accessibility. Not a huge fan of having some JavaScript written inline. I would much rather that JavaScript be in a JavaScript file, or at least in a script tag. Having it inline just sort of muddies up the HTML a lot, in my opinion. Let's see, let's scroll all the way down to the bottom. So we have some JavaScript files for different libraries, and then we have a bunch of JavaScript written in a script tag down here. It looks like the indentation's sort of messed up, although I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that that might have been my fault when I copied everything over. So we'll assume that the indentation, probably not their fault. Though I don't love that they're using var instead of constant let. It seems like they're sort of doing a lot of sort of old school JavaScript a little bit, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but I would like to see them using more modern JavaScript. So overall, I'm going to give this like a 5 out of 10 for the code quality. It's not the best code quality I've ever seen, but it's not the worst either. And as far as which one I think this is, Part of me honestly wants to say this is the $250 one, just because of how good the design was. And after all, the design is what matters, not necessarily the code quality. Like, that's what the users actually see. So for now, I'm going to say this is $250, but I haven't seen the other ones yet. So potentially they're all this good, and I'll move this one down. But for now, let's say $250. Okay, so now this is the second website. We have this hero section with his name and a picture. It looks like the picture sort of fades a little bit when you hover over it. I don't know if I love that effect, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Very basic design. We have the about section. I don't love that this sort of spans the whole width of the page. It makes text pretty hard to read, especially on a large screen. Then we have the gallery. These sort of scale up when you hover over them, but clicking does nothing. Also, I don't love that this isn't centered. It feels like it should be centered on the page. And then we have contact at the bottom. So very basic design here. Already, to be honest, this feels like a ChatGPT design. This is sort of how a lot of ChatGPT websites end up looking. Very basic color schemes and very sort of basic layout. But overall, for the design of this one, I'm going to give it like a 2 or 3 out of 10. Let's say a 3 out of 10, because I don't think it's like the worst design ever, but it definitely leaves a lot to be desired. So 3 out of 10 for the design. And here's the code for the second website. We just have an index.html file and the images folder. So index.html has these styles in it. I don't love doing that again. I would rather this be in its own file, but it's fine. And actually the CSS does look like it's pretty high quality in terms of just like well-formatted CSS. Then we have the body of the HTML. I wish this was using more semantic tags instead of a bunch of divs, because this isn't great for a screen reader. For example, we have class header here, and if you ever have a class called header, that probably means you should just be using the header tag instead, and lots of things like that are what can sort of add up and make a website much more accessible. So I don't love that, but overall, at least the CSS is formatted well. I like that we have alt attributes on the images. Yeah, that's pretty much all of the code here. So overall, the code quality for this one, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. It's not the best in the world, but again, it's not terrible. So overall, 6 out of 10, and I'm going to guess this is the ChatGPT website. And here's website number 3. So we have his name in big font with this sort of hero image, and then we have his name in the navbar is just the first name. That's sort of an interesting stylistic choice. I'm not sure if I like or dislike that. Then we have home, about, portfolio, and contact. So let's see, nice scroll animations. The design here is simplistic, but I do think it looks pretty nice. And I like that they sort of broke it up a bit in the sense that the text isn't spanning the whole width of the page, which makes it much easier to read than like what we got from the last website. And then we have the portfolio. Ooh, this actually looks super nice. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this. I'm getting the impression this is probably some sort of like gallery library that they used, but regardless, it looks really nice. Big fan of that. Then we have a contact form. Pretty straightforward, and this nice footer. So overall, I like this one a lot, although I do wish that it sort of showcased the artwork a little bit more. Like the portfolio section is great, but I would have liked to see more of the artwork throughout the website, maybe have his face in the hero rather than just the stock photo of paint. But overall, it does look pretty nice, so I'll give this a 7 out of 10 for the design. And here we have the code for website number 3. So right off the bat, the HTML looks pretty clean to me. It looks like we're using the more modern semantic elements. I like to see that. Let's see, we have alt attributes on the images, so that is great. Yeah, so it looks like they added an alt attribute for every single image, so that's awesome to see. The tabbing here is a little strange. It seems like it's super indented, but again, that might be something to do with how I copied the file over, so that's fine. And then we have the footer. So yeah, this all looks great. I don't love these scripts at the end of the body. I've talked about this before. I would much rather just have them in the head with a defer attribute. There's not a whole lot of reason to put them in the bottom of the body anymore, but that's fine. It is a style some people prefer. And then we have script.js to, it looks like, handle the portfolio slider. So yeah, this is what seems to be from a library, and it's just the sort of options for that library, so that is fine. Then CSS, we have the style CSS. Ooh, I love that they're using CSS variables. This is a great way to make sure your CSS stays consistent. So yeah, this is pretty good looking CSS. So overall, for the code quality, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. I think this is very good code quality overall. And then as far as which one I think this is, I'm basing this mostly on just the design, but I'm going to guess this is the $50 one because I don't think the design was quite as strong as what we saw in the first design. And here we have website number 4. So this one's pretty simplistic. So we have a blue background, we have his name up here at the top, and then we have some navbar links. I don't love the like circle thing going around the nav links. I think the whole navbar looks just like a little bit dated, like something you would see on a more old school website. Then we have his name with this like half underline style that I love a lot. That actually looks super clean. And then we have the image and the bio. I wish the bio was more compressed. It's a little hard to read when it goes that far towards the edge of the screen. And then we have selected work with the portfolio, and these sort of zoom in a bit. And I can't tell, I think it's that this is centered and this feels like it's off center, possibly because it's being like off center by the image. So I think this might be like almost like part of this somehow, but something is making the sort of alignment sort of awkward because this isn't centered over the middle image. So I'm not a huge fan of that alignment, but overall, I think this part actually looks pretty clean. The images sort of scale up when you hover them. This looks very similar to the one I did, although these aren't like clickable like the version I'd made, but it's very similar. Yeah, that's all there is to this one. So overall for this design, I don't love the color scheme as well as I don't love the nav bar, and there's some weird spacing going on. So I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10. I think it's passable as a portfolio, but it's not the best design of a portfolio I've seen either. Also, quick aside, I did want to mention that with all of these Fiverr sellers, they did offer revisions. So had I asked them to, I could have had them make all of these changes that I want, but I did want to show the sort of most raw version of the websites they gave me. And here's the code for website number 4. So first of all, in the head, looks like we have some links for Google Fonts, as well as a style sheet. So I like that the style sheet's actually in a different file this time. And then let's see, we have the actual content. So it looks like we have a div wrapping the navbar, but we are using the semantic tag for the actual navbar. So that's good to see. I wish these images had alt attributes on them, and I think that goes for all of them. So yeah, there's no alt attributes on the images, which isn't great for accessibility, but overall pretty simple HTML, but I think the HTML is fine. Let's go into the CSS as well. So let's see, I personally am not a huge fan of this like style that I know some people love where you don't have a space between the selector and the curly brace, but some people like it. As long as you're consistent, it's fine. So yeah, overall, I think this CSS looks pretty good. They have a bunch of media queries down here, which is nice to see. It's simplistic, but it looks good to me. So overall, code quality-wise, for this one, I actually think is pretty good. So I'm going to say that this is going to be a 7 out of 10 for code quality. I'm going to guess this is probably the $10 seller, again, mostly based on the design. And now we have website number 5. Right off the bat, I really like that intro animation of sort of the text coming on screen. It looks like they actually added some text. I don't think, yeah, this is not from the bio. So it looks like they actually wrote some extra content for this, which is interesting. And then I like this sort of blue and white. Wait, did that change colors when I wait, what? How does this work? Okay, that's cool. I don't know if they're using like a library for this, but like when I click and drag, I can like change the colors of his name in this. Pretty sweet. Anyways, I really like this hero section. I don't love how the photo goes all the way up to the navbar because it makes the navbar hard to like read. The white just doesn't contrast very well with the image behind it, so it's a little bit hard to read this, but overall this looks super nice. Let's see, as we scroll, ooh, that looks nice too. I like how they sort of cropped this image. So it's the same image as this one, but they cropped it and reversed it, which I almost don't think is even noticeable. And this little like blue box they have behind the image adds a bunch of depth to the website. So I'm a big fan of that. And they did a good job of making sure that the text isn't spanning the whole width of the page like we've seen a little bit before. So that looks really nice. A colorful journey. That just kind of sounds cool. Then let's see, we have the artwork showcase. Ooh, and they've got a similar effect. I think we saw this earlier where it sort of zooms in without making the whole image bigger. So that's nice. If we click on this, cool, it goes full screen. So that looks pretty nice. I'm wondering, I can't tell if this is a library or if they just built this because it's a little bit more simplistic than what we saw before, although I still feel like they used probably some library for this, but overall the sort of portfolio section looks good. And then we have a contact form and a footer. Okay, so this one looks super good. Ooh, and I'm just noticing at the bottom right, we have this like arrow that points up, and as I scroll down, it sort of fills in, and I'm assuming if I click on this, yeah, it brings you back to the top. So that is super, super nice. I don't know if I've ever seen that before, so I'm a big fan of that. Overall, I think this design is super, super nice. This is one of the better designs. Might even be better than the one I said was $250. It's definitely up there. This is definitely one of the more expensive ones, but overall, I'm going to say this is a 9 out of 10 on the design. And so now we have the code of website number 5. So overall, from first glance, this looks pretty good to me. It looks like they are using the more modern semantic tags. Love to see that. They are missing alt attributes on the images, so definitely get docked some accessibility points for that one. But overall, the HTML looks pretty well formatted. The scripts are all at the bottom of the body again, but that is a style some people prefer, and that is a lot of libraries. I'm not obviously going to go into what all of these are. I'm not even sure what a lot of these libraries are, but I'm assuming main.js is probably code they wrote. So let's go into this. It looks like they're using some sort of outdated patterns here. So this is called the module pattern. It's basically like a precursor to what we now use modules for. And it looks like they're using jQuery as well as they're also using var, and there's some commented out code. So overall, I'm not a huge fan of using these more outdated coding styles, but at the same time, they did do some things really well in the code. So I'm going to say that this code is going to be a 7 out of 10 overall. And I think I might actually be correct on all of the guesses. So I'm going to say this is the $175 one, although I wouldn't be surprised if it's the $250 one, just judging by how complex some of this was and how much there was to the design. But I'm going to say 175 for this one. And drum roll please, I did not get them all correct, but I was pretty close. So 2 through 4 I got correct, and I just had the 175 and 250 ones swapped, which in a way is surprising to me because I do think this one, like, for $175, this is such a steal. This is such a good website for that price. But at the same time, this one is a little bit more simplistic than the $250 one. So we can see sort of what we paid for in that one. And I think that one was still super, super good. But this one just feels like it was underpriced. So great job to seller number 1. So overall, is there a difference between a cheap and an expensive freelancer? I would say yes. And is there a difference between their work and the work of a FAANG level software engineer? I'll let y'all decide that, but honestly, I think a lot of these made better designs than I did. And after all, the design is what matters much more than the actual code, because code is not the product, the design is. And if you did want to get like a portfolio made, I actually think going to a Fiverr seller is a great way to do that. If you are looking to do that, then make sure to click the link at the top of the description and use code Connor for a discount. And hiring developers isn't the only reason to be using Fiverr. In fact, I've been using them for years, and this entire video you're watching right now was edited by Lafayette, a Fiverr seller, and I think he did an incredible job. Let me know in the comments if you think he did a good job, as well as let me know if we should do this again. Maybe we'll hire developers to build some more complex websites or applications. And with that said, I will see you next time.